A mug slipped from her hand and hit the floor beside my shoes. The sound was sharp, too loud for such a small kitchen, and she stared at the shattered porcelain as if it were some kind of omen. I bent down to help, but she waved me off with a tired shrug, the same shrug she had given me 1,000 times before. The coffee had splashed across the tiles, spreading slowly, a dark stain she didn't move to clean. It sat there between us, proof of how far she had fallen. She muttered something about not sleeping again last night. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges. I could feel the knot in my chest start to tighten. For years, I had listened to this same tired loop. Jobs she hated, men she couldn't talk to, aches she wouldn't treat, dreams she couldn't touch. But today her eyes had a different heaviness, like even blinking took effort. She sank into the chair, rubbing her temples. I asked if she had called the therapist list I sent her last week. Her mouth twisted. Not yet. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when things calm down. Maybe when she feels ready. Always maybe. Always tomorrow. For a decade, tomorrow had been her safe word. She looked up at me, searching my face for the soft reassurance I always gave. But something inside me had shifted. A small crack opening wider, letting in a flood I couldn't hold back anymore. "Why do you look at me like that?" she whispered. "Because I'm scared of what you're becoming. Because I'm tired of the wait. Because I don't know how many more pieces of you I can pick up." "I can't do this anymore," I said before I even realized the words had left my mouth. They fell between us like another shattered mug, sharp and irretrievable. She lifted her head slowly, confusion tightening the corners of her tired eyes. For a moment, she looked like a child waking from a bad dream, not a woman nearly 40 who'd been drifting through her own life for years. What do you mean?" she asked. My throat burned. I didn't want this scene. I didn't want the tremble in her voice or the way her hands curled into fists, as if she needed something to anchor herself. But the truth had been clawing its way up my ribs for years, and there was no space left inside me to hold it back. I told her I was exhausted, that listening to her repeat the same misery year after year without changing a single thing felt like watching someone drown with their arms folded. I reminded her of the doctors she never called, the jobs she never applied for, the men she ghosted before they even said hello. Each memory tightened her jaw a little more. She tried to laugh it off, a thin, trembling sound. "I know I'm a mess," she whispered, "but I'm trying." Trying. A word so soft it collapsed under its own weight. I stepped back, pressing a hand to the counter. All the years of patience, of gentle encouragement, of holding her together while she came undone. The strain of it pulsed behind my eyes. Her voice cracked. "Are you angry at me?" I wished it were just anger. Anger would have been easier than the grief of watching someone you love refuse to live their life. A pale stripe of late afternoon light stretched across her living room, revealing everything she tried to hide. Dust floated in the air like quiet confessions. A half-folded blanket slumped over the couch. An untouched grocery bag sat on the floor, its handles still upright as if waiting for someone who never arrived. And she was in the middle of it all, shoulders curled inward, eyes fixed on nothing. She tugged at the sleeve of her sweater, twisting the fabric until her knuckles whitened. "You're upset with me," she murmured. It wasn't a question. It was the tired conclusion of someone who had spent years expecting disappointment. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to say I was just tired or worried or having a bad day. But honesty pressed hard behind my ribs. The air between us felt thin, as if one wrong breath could make the whole room splinter. She let out a shaking exhale. Every time I try to start something, my body just stops, like I'm trapped inside myself. I took a step toward her, then paused. Her expression had the hollow look of someone who'd been standing in the same emotional doorway for years, unable to move forward or back. The kind of stuck that makes time feel heavier than it should. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm scared. Because I keep reaching for you, and you keep disappearing a little more each year." Her eyes flickered. fear, hurt, and a flicker of something that looked like shame tightening her mouth. She opened her lips to speak, but the words didn't come. And for the first time, I realized how close she was to slipping under without even noticing. She blinked fast, as if the room had suddenly brightened too much for her eyes to bear. Her hands rose halfway, then fell again, landing limply on her lap. That tiny motion, barely anything, hit me harder than any argument she could have thrown back. It was the reaction of someone who had run out of defenses, out of excuses, out of energy. "I don't know how to fix myself," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word, thin as a worn thread. "I keep thinking tomorrow will be different, but every tomorrow feels the same." I leaned against the edge of the doorway, forcing myself not to rush in and rescue her the way I always did. If I did, she'd collapse back into old patterns. If I didn't, she might sink even deeper. There was no safe place to stand. Every option hurt. "You're not broken," I said, "but you're drowning, and you've been pretending you're just tired." Her throat tightened. I saw it. One heartbeat of panic she tried to swallow down. She glanced at the floor, at the scattered mail, at the shoes she never put away. Her whole life lived in unfinished corners. "I don't want to be like this," she said. "I'm just scared all the time, of choosing wrong, of failing, of everything." The honesty was raw, trembling, almost childlike. I stepped closer, but kept my voice steady. "It's not failure to ask for help. Failure is letting fear steer your entire life while you call it caution." She flinched, not angrily, more like the words had hit a bruise she kept covered. A faint tapping echoed from the radiator, soft, uneven, like something in the room had grown restless. She flinched at the noise, shoulders lifting as if she expected the world to take another swing at her. It shouldn't have rattled her that much, but it did. Every small sound seemed to land on nerves already stretched thin. She pressed her palms together. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I'm doing this to myself." Her voice wavered, brittle and unsteady. "But every time I think about changing something, even one small thing, I freeze." I sat across from her, watching the way she kept wringing her fingers, as if trying to warm them. The truth was beginning to spill out. Not the complaints she always recycled, but the parts she usually hid behind them. The fear, the paralysis, the shame. "You don't have to leap," I said, "but you do have to move, even an inch." Her laugh came out as a broken puff of air. "I can't even call a therapist. How pathetic is that?" "It's not pathetic," I answered gently. "It's depression, it's anxiety, it's years of carrying things alone." She shook her head hard, hair falling over her eyes. "I don't want to need anyone." "But you do," I said. "We all do. And I'm here, just not in the way that lets you stay stuck." Her breath hitched, a sharp, quiet sound, the kind someone makes right before admitting a truth they've avoided for too long. The room felt smaller than it had an hour ago. The air sat heavy, as if every unmade decision she'd carried for years had gathered in the corners and pressed inward. I shifted in my chair, suddenly aware of how still everything was. No music, no television, not even the hum of a fan. Just her breathing, shallow and uneven, and mine trying to stay steady. She stared at the window, though the blinds were barely open. "Do you ever get tired of me?" she asked. The question came low, as if she hoped I wouldn't hear it. I felt my chest tighten, not because it was unfair, but because it was the one question I'd spent years dodging. I exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle before speaking. "I get tired of watching you hurt," I said. "I get tired of watching you live the same day over and over. Not of you, never of you." She swallowed hard, eyes glossing over. "Then why did you snap at me?" I traced a line along the edge of the table. "Because I've been holding you together for so long that I forgot you were supposed to hold yourself, too." She drew her knees to her chest, an old habit from the days when she was barely out of her 20s. "I know I'm slipping," she whispered. "I just don't know how to stop." Her voice cracked on the last word. That sound, thin, frightened, felt like something tearing inside both of us. "I'm here," I said softly, "but I can't climb out of this for you." Her eyes finally met mine, wide and lost, like she was seeing the edge she'd been standing on all along. She pushed herself up from the chair too fast, and her knee bumped the corner of the table with a dull thud. She winced, gripping the edge as if the small jolt had knocked something loose inside her. The movement startled me, not because it was dramatic, but because it showed how unsteady she'd become, even in her own home. "I don't want to be this person," she said, her breath uneven. "The one who talks and never does anything." I stood slowly, giving her space. She brushed her hair behind her ear, but her hand trembled halfway through, and she dropped it without finishing the motion. Her eyes drifted to the stack of unopened envelopes on the counter, the abandoned to-do lists, the marks of a life paused so long it had started to blur. "I used to be different," she whispered. "You remember that, right?" I did. I remembered the woman who used to text me about new recipes she wanted to try, the woman who used to drag me to the gym at 6 in the morning because she liked the feeling of starting strong. I remembered her laughter, light, uncontained, not this thin ribbon of sound she offered now. "You're still in there," I said, "but you're buried under years of fear and exhaustion and loneliness you won't admit you feel." She pressed a hand to her chest as if the words struck something raw. What if I never get back to myself? The question hung between us, fragile, desperate, and heavier than anything she'd said before. "Tell me the truth," she said, "all of it, even if it hurts." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in the way she said it, steady, resigned, almost pleading, that told me she'd finally stopped running from what she already knew. I drew in a slow breath. "You're drowning," I said, "and you act like you're just tired. You keep saying you want a different life, but you never take the smallest step toward it. You sit in pain like it's familiar furniture." She looked down, jaw tightening. "I know. You ask me for advice," I continued, "and then ignore every bit of it. Not because you're stubborn, but because fear has convinced you that staying miserable is safer than risking anything." Her breath stuttered. "I'm not trying to make you carry me." "But you are," I said gently. "Every time you tell me the same story, every time you refuse help, every time you crumble and ask me what you should do, you hand me all the weight you won't touch." Her shoulders slumped. "I didn't realize." "I know," I said, "and I should have told you sooner, but I kept hoping you'd wake up one morning and choose yourself again." She covered her mouth with the back of her hand, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to start." "You start by wanting to live more than you want to stay afraid." Her fingers trembled, and she let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. The sky outside had shifted to a muted blue, the kind that makes everything inside look a little colder. The light filtered through the blinds in thin, uneven bands, cutting across her face like pieces of a story she didn't know how to put back together. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, staring at the floor as if it might offer her instructions. "I feel like I've wasted my whole 30s, she said quietly, like I blinked and a decade disappeared. The honesty hit me hard, because it wasn't dramatic. It was simply true. I'd watched her lose herself inch by inch, telling herself she had more time, more chances, more tomorrows, and now tomorrow felt like a shrinking doorway she was afraid to walk through. "You haven't wasted it," I said, stepping closer. "You've been stuck. That's different." "But stuck for this long?" she asked. "What kind of person doesn't fix their own life?" "The kind who's overwhelmed," I answered. The kind who carries more fear than energy. The kind who needs support, not shame. She closed her eyes, pressing her fingertips against her brow. You think I'm sick, don't you? I think you're hurting, I said, and you've been hurting so long that you think it's normal. A soft, trembling breath left her. She looked up at me then, truly looked, and something shifted in her expression. Not clarity, not yet, but recognition. A small flicker of wanting to fight for herself instead of just surviving. I don't want this to be my life, she whispered. Then let's find a way out of it, I said. But you have to walk, even if it's slow. She took a step back, almost stumbling into the edge of the bookshelf. Her hand shot out to steady herself, fingers splayed against the wood. The sudden movement startled me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was the first time she'd physically reacted to her own truth instead of shrinking from it. I don't even know who I am anymore, she said. Her voice wavered, but there was something new beneath it, not strength, not yet, but an ache that was finally turning outward instead of festering inside her. I moved slowly, giving her enough distance to breathe. You don't have to know who you are right now, I said. You just have to know you're not done. She let her head fall forward, hair slipping around her face like a curtain she didn't bother pushing back. Every day feels heavier than the last, like the simplest things. Calling a doctor, cleaning my apartment, even deciding what to eat, feels impossible. That's real, I said. That's something people treat like laziness when it's actually exhaustion wearing a mask. She swallowed hard. Why didn't I see it sooner? Because you lived inside it, I said. And being inside pain makes everything look normal. Her fingers curled against the bookshelf. If I try, if I fail again, I don't know if I can take it. You don't have to do this alone, I said, but you do have to take the first step. Not for me, for you. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the last bit of fading daylight. For the first time in years, she didn't wipe it away. A faint clatter came from the hallway, just her coat slipping off its hook and landing on the floor. But the sound made her flinch, as if something inside her had cracked. She stared at the fallen fabric for a long moment, chest rising shallowly, as though even that small disturbance mirrored her life too perfectly. Things sliding out of place while she watched, frozen. She bent to pick it up. But her hand hovered mid-air and then fell uselessly to her side. See? She whispered. I can't even pick up my own coat. It's not about the coat, I said. It's about what it represents. She shook her head slowly, eyes reddening but focused. I used to be able to handle everything. I handled work, dating, bills, errands, and now I can't handle a single thing without wanting to cry. I stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. It happens slowly. You don't notice the pieces you drop because you're trying so hard to keep the rest from falling. Her breath came in uneven pulses. So what do I do now? You call one therapist, I said softly. Just one. You clean one corner of the room. You take one walk, not a transformation, a beginning. She wrapped her arms around herself, gripping her elbows as if trying to keep from unraveling. What if it's too late? It isn't, I said. But if you wait another year, another 5, another 10, it will feel like it. Her eyes flickered with a fear so raw, it almost looked like awakening. The room had gone so still it felt suspended, as if time had paused just long enough for her to decide whether she wanted to keep living the way she had been. The fading light brushed the walls in a dull amber tone, catching on the edges of old picture frames she hadn't dusted in months. She stared at them, at the younger version of herself smiling without hesitation, eyes bright, posture confident, a woman she no longer recognized. Her voice broke the silence. I miss her, she said, the version of me who wasn't afraid of everything. I followed her gaze. She's not gone. She's waiting for you to come back. She touched the frame gently, tracing the outline of her past self. I don't know where to start. You start, I said, by admitting that you can't keep living like this. She turned toward me, and for the first time all evening, something changed in her expression. Not hope, not relief, but a faint clarity, a hint that the fog she'd been living in might be thinning at the edges. I've been making you carry too much, she said quietly. I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. I shook my head. It's not about hurting me. It's about watching you disappear piece by piece. She let out a trembling breath. If I call someone, if I finally ask for help, will you still be here? Yes, I said, but this time I'll be beside you, not in front of you, dragging you forward. Her shoulders loosened just a little. The first crack of surrender after years of clinging to fear. She reached for her phone, but her hand shook so hard she had to set it back down on the table. The device made a soft, uneven tap against the wood, small, but full of meaning. She stared at it as though it were a mountain she wasn't sure she could climb. I haven't dialed a single number in 4 years, she said. Every time I try, my chest tightens and I feel stupid. I moved closer, not touching her, just letting her know I was there. It's not stupidity, I said. It's fear. Fear that asking for help means admitting something's wrong. She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the phone as if it held her entire future. What if they judge me? They won't, I said gently. And even if one person does, there will be others who don't. She picked up the phone again. This time she held it longer, thumb hovering near the screen, breath catching in tiny, uneven bursts. Her shoulders trembled as if the smallest step forward required more courage than anyone else could understand. I don't want to disappoint you, she whispered. You can't, I said. The only thing that hurts is watching you let fear dictate every moment of your life. Her thumb inched closer to the contact list. She wasn't calling yet, not quite, but she wasn't collapsing back into old patterns either. She was standing at the edge of a choice, trembling but present, and for the first time I believed she might actually step forward. A soft vibration rattled across the tabletop, the low hum of her phone coming to life in her unsteady grip. The sound startled her, and she nearly dropped it again. Her breath hitched, sharp and shallow, as if that tiny vibration had echoed straight through her bones. She stared at the screen, watching the light flicker across her face. I don't know if I can press the button, she whispered. It feels like, if I make this call, everything changes. It changes for the better, I said gently, but only if you try. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the kind of fear that's been built layer upon layer over years of avoiding the very moment she was standing in now. She swallowed hard, throat bobbing. What if I can't follow through? Then we regroup, I said, but at least you'll have started. She lifted the phone closer. Her thumb hovered over the first therapist's number, trembling so violently it blurred the words on the screen. For a few seconds, she closed her eyes and breathed, slow and shaky, like she was trying to convince her body it was safe. I'm scared, she said. I know, I replied. But fear isn't a stop sign. It's a signal you're near something important. She opened her eyes again. Something steadier flickered through them. Not strength exactly, but a fragile determination. Her thumb lowered a fraction of an inch, not a full motion, not yet, but closer than she'd ever been. The room dimmed as early evening settled outside, casting long, uneven shadows across the walls. They stretched toward her like silent reminders of every year she'd spent hiding from her own life. She held the phone close to her chest now, fingers curled around it, as if she were afraid it might slip away before she found the courage to act. She lifted her head slowly. If I make this call, does that mean I'm admitting something is wrong with me? It means you're admitting you deserve better, I said. Her lips parted, trembling with a breath she couldn't quite steady. I've been telling myself I'm fine for so long. even when I wasn't. I know, I said. You've been surviving, not living. A fragile silence followed. She looked toward the window where the streetlights had begun to glow, soft circles of gold appearing in the dusk. I used to think I had time, she whispered. That one day I'd just wake up and be braver. You don't find bravery, I said. You walk into it. She stared at the glowing screen again. Her thumb hovered over the call button, her body tense like a held breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, her hand loosened, not from defeat, but from surrendering the fight she'd been losing with herself for years. I don't want to be this version of me anymore, she said. Then take one small step, I replied. Just one. Her thumb moved. It didn't press the button yet, but it moved. Her shoulders jerked the moment her thumb made that tiny shift, as if the realization of what she was doing hit her all at once. She pulled the phone back slightly, gripping it with both hands now, her knuckles pale with tension. It was the posture of someone standing at the edge of a cold pool, shivering before the jump, knowing the shock will come, but knowing, too, that staying on the ledge is no longer an option. I feel like I'm about to jump off a cliff, she whispered. It's not a cliff, I said. It's a doorway. She shook her head, breath unsteady. But what if I can't walk through it? You already started, I said. That's all that matters. Her eyes darted across the screen, scanning the name she'd been avoiding for years. She lifted her thumb again, hovering over the call button, her breath catching at the top of her chest. Her whole body leaned forward a fraction, as if drawn towards something she both feared and needed. I don't want you to think I'm weak, she said softly. Weakness is pretending nothing's wrong, I said. What you're doing right now, that's strength. She looked at me then, really looked, with a vulnerability that made my throat tighten. She had spent years drowning silently, years convincing herself her fear was just caution, her paralysis just a phase. But now, in this quiet room with the world dimming outside, she was choosing something different. I'm so scared, she breathed. I'll stay, I said, but you have to be the one who presses it. Her thumb trembled once more, then it lowered. I'm doing it, she said, quiet, almost breathless, but there was a raw edge in her tone that hadn't been there before, a small, fierce thread of determination. Her thumb rested on the call button now, the screen glowing against her skin. She didn't press it yet, but she wasn't pulling back either. I stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. I'm right here, I said. She let out a shaky laugh. You know what's crazy? I've imagined this moment 100 times, and in every version, I fail. You're not failing, I said. You're facing the thing you've been running from for years. Her eyes narrowed toward the phone, her expression tightening with a strange mixture of fear and clarity. I can't keep living like this, she whispered. I wake up every day already exhausted. I go to bed dreading the next morning. I feel like I'm trapped in molasses. You deserve more than survival, I said, and this call is the first real step toward that. She inhaled deeply, the breath catching halfway, her throat working as she tried to steady herself. If I do this, everything in my life has to change. Yes, I said, but not all at once, just one piece at a time. Her thumb pressed down, not fully, but enough to make the screen shift to the next option, enough to move her out of the place she'd been stuck for years. She stared at the phone, chest rising and falling rapidly, and said, barely above a whisper, I don't think I've ever been this brave. The first street lamp outside flickered to life, casting a thin beam of gold across her living room floor. It stretched toward her feet like a quiet invitation, a reminder that the world outside her walls was still turning, even if she hadn't been. She stared at that line of light, her chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths, the phone still cupped between her hands. It feels unreal, she said, like this tiny thing shouldn't matter so much. It matters because it's the first thing you've chosen for yourself in a long time, I said. She let the words settle, her gaze softening as she watched the light slowly widen with the coming evening. For a moment, she looked almost peaceful. Fragile, yes, but less fractured than she'd been an hour ago. I don't want to lose your support, she whispered. What if I change and everything between us changes too? Our friendship won't break, I said, but it can't stay in the place it's been, not when it's been hurting both of us. She swallowed, the movement tight and hesitant. I guess I've been hiding behind you, she murmured, letting you carry the parts of my life I didn't want to face. You weren't hiding behind me, I said softly. You were hiding from yourself. Her eyes drifted back to the phone screen. The therapist's number glowed quietly, waiting. I don't want to live like this anymore, she said again, this time with a steadiness that made something inside me loosen. Her thumb hovered. The world outside seemed to pause with her. She tightened her grip on the phone, just enough for the plastic to creak softly under her fingers. The sound was small, barely audible, but it carried the weight of every hesitation she'd lived with for years. Her breathing grew uneven again, but this time she didn't pull away. She held the phone close, as if anchoring herself to the decision she was finally ready to face. I don't want to disappoint myself again, she whispered. You won't, I said. Not if this is the moment you finally choose yourself. Her eyes drifted toward the far corner of the room, where a stack of unopened mail sat piled on a chair. She looked at it the way someone might look at an old wound, familiar, painful, no longer ignorable. Everything in my life is like that, she murmured, a pile I keep walking around. You start clearing it one piece at a time, I said, and tonight the first piece is this call. Her lips pressed together, not in resistance, but in a fragile resolve. She lifted the phone again, thumb resting on the call icon. Her shoulders trembled, but she didn't lower it this time. I can't believe it took me this long, she said. Sometimes, I said gently, a person has to hit a quiet breaking point before they realize they deserve a different life. She inhaled slowly, then her thumb moved, closer, deliberate, trembling but intentional. She wasn't running anymore. Stay with me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If I do this, just stay. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. She nodded, but her throat tightened as if even that reassurance hurt to accept. The phone screen dimmed for a second and she tapped it quickly with the tip of her thumb, keeping the number in view. That tiny tap made her flinch, like the smallest motion carried too much meaning now. I feel like my whole life is balanced on this one moment, she said. Like everything changes if I move a single inch. It will change, I said softly. But that's the point. She swallowed hard. I don't want to be the person who never tries. Then don't be, I answered. Her eyes met mine, wide, frightened, searching. Do you think I can actually get better? Yes, I said. I think you're terrified, exhausted, overwhelmed, and still trying. That's what healing starts with. She drew in a shaky breath. Her thumb touched the call button. This time she didn't pull away. She didn't freeze. She didn't collapse back into excuses or fear or silence. She held her breath, pressed it. The tone rang once, loud in the quiet room, then again. Her body stiffened, but she didn't hang up. She was finally stepping into her own life. The ringing echoed through the room, steady and unfamiliar, like a sound she'd forgotten belonged in her life. Outside, the streetlights glowed brighter against the deepening dusk, casting soft pools of light along the sidewalk. The world looked strangely peaceful, almost as if it were holding its breath with her. She gripped the phone tighter. What if they answer? She whispered. That's what you want, I said gently. She let out a shaky exhale, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. Every second of ringing stretched long enough to make her doubt herself, then short enough to force her to keep going. Her shoulders rose and fell with tense, uneven breaths. "I'm not ready," she said. "You're ready enough." She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away either. The phone rang again. The sound seemed to vibrate through her, past the years of fear, the paralysis, the exhaustion she had mistaken for personality. She was standing in a moment she had avoided for nearly a decade, and it trembled inside her like a fragile awakening. "What if they ask what's wrong with me?" she said. "They'll ask how they can help," I replied. The ringing cut off. A soft click followed, then a voice on the other end, warm, calm, professional. "Hello, this is Dr. Mercer's office." Her eyes widened, her breath caught. But she didn't hang up. She opened her mouth. For the first time in years, she spoke for herself. She froze, not with fear this time, but with the stunned realization that someone was waiting for her words. The room felt suspended, as though even the air understood this moment mattered more than anything she'd done for herself in years. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Yet her posture shifted just slightly forward, like something inside her had finally leaned toward living. "Hello," she said. The word came out thin, but it came. Her voice trembled, uncertain at the edges, but it didn't vanish the way it used to. She stood there, breathing unevenly, listening to the calm voice on the other end greet her. I'm calling because I think I need help," she whispered. Her eyes fluttered shut the moment she said it, as if the weight of that sentence had taken years to lift into the air. But she didn't take it back. She didn't correct herself. She didn't apologize. She listened, nodding slowly as the receptionist explained appointment options. Her hand shook, but she kept the phone pressed to her ear, absorbing every word like oxygen she hadn't allowed herself to breathe. When they asked for her availability, she hesitated, then gave an answer, a real answer, a date, a time, a commitment. When the call ended, she lowered the phone gently, not dropping it, not letting it slip. She placed it on the table with care, like it was something sacred. Her voice broke into a fragile, astonished whisper. "I did it." And this time, she didn't look to me for affirmation. She looked at herself. She sank into the nearest chair, hands falling open in her lap as if her body was finally releasing a decade of tension. A long, shaky exhale slipped out of her, quiet but unmistakably different from every exhausted sigh I'd heard over the years. This one didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like relief trying to remember how to exist. She brushed a stray hair behind her ear, and for the first time all evening, her hand didn't tremble. "I didn't think I could do it," she said. "I really didn't." Her voice quivered, but there was a thread of pride woven through it, a thread she didn't seem to recognize yet. I sat across from her, studying the shift in her expression. Her eyes still held fear, still held the familiar weight, but something new flickered behind it, a spark, small but alive. "You did something huge tonight," I said. "You chose to help yourself." She shook her head softly, almost in disbelief. "It was just a phone call." "It was the first door," I said, "and you opened it." She looked around her apartment, the clutter, the undone tasks, the life she'd been stalled inside for too long. But instead of shrinking from it, she breathed in slowly, as if seeing it all with clearer eyes. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted. "You don't need to. You just need to keep taking real steps." She nodded, fingers curling gently against her knees. Not in fear this time, more like grounding herself. I think I'm ready to try," she said, and the quiet conviction in her voice felt like its own kind of miracle. The last light of evening slipped across her living room, softening everything it touched, the worn cushions, the cluttered shelves, the half-finished pieces of a life she hadn't known how to hold. She sat quietly in the middle of it all, her posture no longer collapsed inward, but lifted just enough to show something inside her had shifted, not fixed, not transformed, just turning. I'm scared of tomorrow, she said quietly. But for the first time, I'm not scared of trying. I watched her run her palm across the surface of the table, slow and steady, like she was relearning the feel of her own world. The tension around her eyes had eased, the tightness in her jaw had softened. She wasn't a different person. She was simply a person who had finally reached toward herself. You're going to have hard days, I said, but now they won't be wasted ones. She nodded, letting the words settle. Her gaze drifted to the phone resting on the edge of the table, its screen dark but charged with the weight of what she'd done. She touched it gently, almost reverently, like it carried the beginning she'd been running from for years. I think I want my life back, she whispered, even if I have to take it inch by inch. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She leaned back, exhaling slowly, as though her body was finally remembering how to release instead of collapse. And in the quiet that followed, something steadied inside her, a small, fragile beginning held in the palm of a single breath.